So the good news is it's not as bad as the days of Downton Abbey. It's not as bad as it was in the 1920s and 1930s, but something really profound happened in 2010. So in 2010, things began to change quite radically. Since 2010, the top 1% have multiplied their wealth by 31 times more than everybody else. And the people who are at the sharp end of that inequality are young people who can't afford a house, can't afford an education, can't afford to repay their student debt, can certainly not afford to repay their pension. And what we saw in the election results is something quite interesting. What we saw is that a big part of that anger that went into the reform vote was in those places where deprivation is worst. So if we're serious about defeating populism, we have to fix wealth inequality, and we have to start creating a different kind of future for our young people.
One thing that surprised me, maybe, I think people of our generation can often say that the people of the generation above us had it all great, but you showed within your research that anyone born after about 1964, so there isn't a boomer, there's just been a decline in prosperity of essentially everyone that's come after that point.
Yeah, so there's two things going on here. So one, those who kind of started work, after the 1970s, certainly after the 1980s, they're competing in a global labour market which is 1 billion people big, because after China joined the World Trade Organization and this huge migration from the farm to the factory in China, added hundreds of millions of people to the labour market. Couple that with capital mobility, you've now got a global market in which we're all competing as workers. That has kept a cap on wages. And if you add into that some of the laws which haven't encouraged trade unions, you get a real problem on the wage front. But second, it's just become really difficult for young people to buy assets, whether that's a pension, an education, or a pension. And part of the reason for that is assets are now much more expensive compared to wages. So when I was born back in 1970, the wealth of the country was about 3 times the annual wages of the country. Now the wealth of the country, and therefore the asset prices, are 10 times the average wages of the country. So what that means is assets are just now far, far more expensive compared to the wages that anyone can earn.
And important.
And important.
In terms of life outcomes, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And happiness and things. And feeling of security, your freedom, your agency, your options, your opportunity. There's a big old debate about freedom in politics, but the truth is that there isn't any freedom worth its name without security, and there's no security without wealth.
Do you think someone can come from a working class or whatever that means, or a lower income background, and prosper in this country now?
So I do. And the book before this was a book called Dragons, which was an economic history of Britain told through the lives of 10 of our greatest entrepreneurs. And, that does tell you that it is possible that, the rags to riches story is possible. But the truth is, it's unusual. Most of our most successful entrepreneurs don't come from the most humble working class routes. They come from middle class routes. They've had the resilience to fail and fail and fail and then succeed. So I was lucky. I went to a pretty violent comprehensive school in Harlow, but thanks to a Fulbright scholarship, I went to the Harvard Business School. I was the only kid from a British comprehensive school there. And when I was raising money for my business at the end of the dot-com boom, I couldn't get money from American venture capitalists because they said, look, unless you failed 3 times, we don't think you've learned enough to invest in. But who can afford to fail 3 times? Well, actually, middle-class kids can. Working class kids, it's a hell of a lot tougher. It's not impossible, but it's a hell of a lot tougher.
Yeah, I've seen a criticism of this recently online, this fail culture, where people are like, you need to fail all the time. And, if you're from a background where you've got nothing to fall back on, you might borrow the only bit of money you can off your mum. You can't go back to and go, oh, that one didn't work, but, the next 10 to one.
It's quite a short conversation.
Yeah. That was a clip from our interview with Labour MP Liam Byrne, and you can watch the whole interview right here.